The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Dewbs & Co, the show where we'll get into some of the things that have got you talking today. Now, tensions are heating up over in the China-Taiwan situation. China now firing missiles as part of some weird, some are saying, military drill. Are we in danger of an escalation, and should the UK be worried? And here, the government is trying to put pressure onto water companies to have further hosepipe bans. We've got councils trying to ban the sale of disposable barbecues, and all the while, we're being encouraged to grass on our neighbours. Are we in a nanny state gone mad? And where do you stand on mandatory diversity and inclusion training? Should it be allowed, or should it just be scrapped? Well, I have all of that to come with my panel, Lawrence Fox and Pamana Assad, tonight in just a second. But first, let's get ourselves up to date with the latest news headlines brought to you by Bethany Elsey.
Michelle, thank you. I am Bethany Elsey in the GB newsroom. The UK economy is facing its longest recession since the financial crisis, with the Bank of England warning inflation's likely to hit 13% this year. The forecast came as the BOE announced its biggest interest rate rise in nearly 30 years, hiking it by half a percentage point to 1.75%. Mortgages and loans will be more expensive, but there'll be a better return on savings. The Governor, Andrew Bailey, says the central bank is committed to its 2% inflation target.
I recognise the significant impact this will have and how difficult the cost of living challenge will continue to be for many people in the United Kingdom. Inflation hits the least well-off hardest. But if we don't act to prevent inflation becoming persistent, the consequences later will be worse, and that will require larger increases in interest rates.
Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves is blaming the government for losing control of the economy.
I think the people who are asleep at the wheel is the Conservative government, because the UK is forecast next year to have the lowest growth in the G20, except for Russia, and the highest inflation in the G7. 12 years of Conservative economic mismanagement have led us to be uniquely exposed to the higher gas and electricity prices.
Well, Business Minister Greg Hands says there'll be more help later in the year, but he acknowledged the situation is difficult.
£37 billion of support that we've already put in. As I say, a lot of that hasn't actually yet taken effect. We need to make sure that people know that the government here will do everything within our means to make sure that people have got the means to take on those higher bills. We can't promise this is going to be a situation where everybody is going to be completely insulated. It's part of a global crisis. All Western countries are going through similar problems at the moment with this heightened inflation.
Ofgem has announced the energy price cap will now be updated every 3 months instead of every 6, warning customers face a very challenging winter ahead. It says the change will go some way to provide stability in the market, making sure customers are only paying their real cost of their energy. Ofgem boss Jonathan Brearley cites Russia's actions in Ukraine as being behind the volatile market, leading to a surge in gas and electric prices. 2 Sussex police officers are facing possible manslaughter charges after a 93-year-old man with dementia was tasered at a care home. The pensioner, who was in a wheelchair and had one leg, was threatening staff with a knife when police responded, hitting him with a baton and using something similar to pepper spray. He died 3 weeks later. The Independent Office for Police Conduct is investigating the incident at St Leonard's-on-Sea. Archie Battersby's mother says she prays the High Court will do the right thing to give her son a dignified death. The court is currently holding a hearing into the parents' request to move the 12-year-old to a hospice. In a statement, Holly Dance said it would be inhumane if they refused permission to move Archie from Royal London Hospital to palliative care. Archie has been in a coma since April. Around 400 migrants in 8 small boats have been brought ashore by border officers at Dover. It's only been 2 days since the largest crossing was recorded this year, which saw nearly 700 arrivals. This brings the number of people who've crossed the channel in small boats this year to almost 17,300, nearly doubling the number of migrant arrivals from a year ago. In Russia, a judge has sentenced basketball player Brittany Griner to more than 9 years for drug smuggling and possession. It comes 6 months after the American was arrested at an airport with vape cartridges containing cannabis oil. US President Joe Biden described the jail term as unacceptable and called on Moscow to release her immediately. And the amount of coral growth at Australia's Great Barrier Reef has reached record levels. Researchers say it's the most coral cover they've seen in 36 years. But experts are warning it's still vulnerable. Mass bleaching and climate change could quickly unravel this progress. On TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now let's get back to Michelle.
Thanks for that, Bethany. Well, keeping me company until 7 o'clock tonight, my panel. We've got the leader of the Reclaim Party, Lawrence Fox, and Permana Hassad, who is a Labour councillor. You know the drill as well, don't you, on Dewbs & Co? It's not just about us three here, it's about you at home as well. Get in touch. What is on your mind tonight? We're going to be talking China and Taiwan. I want to talk to you about whether or not here we're in a nanny state gone mad, and also about the whole diversity and inclusion. It's a massive industry now, isn't it, it seems, but should people be essentially forced onto mandatory training in places like their workplace? Yes or no? You tell me. You can get in touch. gbviews@gbnews.uk is the email, or you can tweet me at gbnews or at Michelle Dewbs. We love the conversation here as well, so I want to say thank you to all of you that are supporting us here at GB News. We had our radio figures out, I think it was yesterday, and GB News has the biggest growth in our category, so thank you. If you are someone that listens to us, and you might be listening to me right now. Also as well, TV-wise, we're growing and growing. There were many people that said that GB News wouldn't even be a thing after a year. Well, how wrong they are, because this programme, for example, we're regularly beating the same slot on, for example, Sky News. So thank you. If you're watching, listening, getting in conversation with us, we very much appreciate our little GB News family, so we do. And tell all your friends if you haven't already. Right, let's start with China, shall we? Their foreign minister says the US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's trip to Taiwan is, I quote, manic, irresponsible and irrational. One of the foreign ministers said there as well, and I also quote, those who play with fire will not come to a good end, and those who offend China will be punished. Well, now China has held a series of military drills in the seas near Taiwan. President Xi has said that he wants to bring Taiwan under Beijing's control by 2050. Now, let's be honest, China, Taiwan, it all feels very far away, doesn't it? So how worried should us in Britain be about what's going on? What would the impact be on us if it was to escalate? I'm joined now by Scott Lucas, who's an international politics professor at the University of Birmingham. Good evening to you. Let me start by asking you, Scott, do you think this situation has the potential to escalate?
Oh, Michelle, of course, whenever you've got military activity in an area, it could escalate, not necessarily because China would intend to overrun Taiwan, but let's say as they conduct these military exercises, that one of these missiles went off course and that it hit another military or civilian target, whether it be in Taiwan or whether it be somewhere else in the Pacific. Japan is also affected by the exercises going on. But that being said, Michelle, I would want to come back a little bit off the headlines that are talking about military confrontation today, because I think if we look at what is happening, we've got a little bit of chest beating by China, which is drawing its lines, which is Taiwan will not be independent. The U.S. has drawn its line with the visit of the congressional delegation, including the House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, which is the U.S. will support Taiwan's autonomy. And I think if those lines are understood, and I suspect they are, because there was a call between Chinese leader Xi Jinping and President Joe Biden last week, if the lines are understood and not crossed, then we will have this tension for a while, but then we'll go back to what is not exactly business as usual. It's never quite normal, but we'll get back to the economic, political activity that we've had for decades in this region.
And do you think the one China policy is still the right one for people to be following?
Well, it's not for me to say the right policy, because it just simply is the policy that China will be following, because the Chinese Communist government has never recognized the nationalist government that fled to Taiwan in 1949. And in effect, diplomatically, almost every country in the world, including the UK, switched from recognizing Taiwan to Beijing in the 1970s. And that's not going to change. Just because of the size of China, just because of the significance of it on the Asian continent, it will still have the seat in the UN, for example. But at the same time, while recognizing China and while not endorsing Taiwan's independence, because that's not going to happen, I think it is important to uphold Taiwan's autonomy, the right to conduct its economic affairs, its political affairs, and to not be threatened with a military invasion.
Scott, I don't know, say Dave the plumber in Wigan is sat watching this tonight, and he might be thinking, why is Michelle talking about China and Taiwan? What's that got to do with us here in the UK? How would escalation, conflict there affect us here?
Well, of course, first of all, Michelle, just as we've seen with Ukraine, it's the people of the country that are affected first when there's an invasion or if there's any type of action. And I think even though we're very distant from a Ukraine or from a Taiwan, I'm affected when I see people whose lives are taken over or disrupted because they're invaded. Now, how does it affect us more directly? Well, I got to be honest with you here. We will feel it, because with Ukraine, for example, we've already had the disruption to global food markets, global energy markets, global supply markets in general, and we will see the effects in our bills, for example. Well, this will happen with Taiwan as well. It's a very small country, but it's a very important economy. The Asian regional economy, which includes Japan and South Korea, is very, very important. Only a few months ago, this government talked about how important Asia is as part of global Britain. So I think the biggest effect we've had is that for more than 70 years, we've had an international rule of law, international order, if you will. It's being challenged now by Vladimir Putin in Ukraine, and it could be challenged by China. And it's that disruption of the rule of law that might seem a bit abstract to us, but it affects us in the day-to-day way that we can go out and conduct our jobs, that we can go get an education, or even in the prices that we pay in our household bills.
Yeah, indeed. Fascinating stuff. Scott Lucas, thank you very much for your insight there. That's Scott Lucas, the International Politics Professor at the University of Birmingham. Lawrence Fox, what do you make of it all?
It's not often that I like Speaker Pelosi. But, because she's a bit insane in lots of ways. But I really like the way that she's said it's not up to China where I travel. So she's almost sort of forced to go there now that China has said not to. And the Biden administration is messed up because they didn't want her to go. But I was reading about her today, and she also went to Tiananmen Square after the massacre there. So she's actually gone up in my estimations, which is quite weird for me, because usually I find her a bit peculiar. So
you actually think it was the right move for her to be there?
Yeah, I mean, America, what does America have to offer the world? Deterrence. That's what America has to offer the world. And if China's going to start swinging its fists around, then America has the responsibility. It said it will defend Taiwan, and it should. So, yeah, I mean, I want to say something bad about Nancy Pelosi, but I can't.
Yeah, see, Pamana, I mean, yes, the US, essentially, they have to provide Taiwan with the means to defend itself. But ultimately, we, the UK, they, the US, we don't recognise Taiwan as a sovereign nation, essentially. And there is a big school of thought, which is actually, it's all well and good Nancy Pelosi getting on a plane, heading off to Taiwan. She's not essentially going to be affected by many of the consequences that could potentially come off this visit. Where do you stand on it?
So I think it was the wrong time for Nancy Pelosi to do this. And I think the reason for that is because we have a war in Europe currently with Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And, you know, Nancy Pelosi was told by the Biden administration, specifically his defense advisors, not to do this. This is not the right time to agitate China. And I think that whilst, you know, Nancy Pelosi is completely right in saying that China shouldn't dictate where she should travel or where she should not, and she's a very fierce woman, and I think that it's right that she went, but I think that this time and moment is the wrong time, and I think the reason for that is because of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and this, you know, allows China to think, well, actually, if Russia can do it to Ukraine, maybe we can do it to Taiwan. And it seems like what Nancy Pelosi has done is agitated the situation and made China feel like we've got to go and do those military drills. We've got to actually do our, you know, line a mark in the sand.
Yeah, and the political strategist there was just talking about missiles potentially going off course. We've already seen these missiles, in this instance now, land in Japanese water. So aren't you a little bit worried, Lawrence, that this all has the potential to escalate and cause goodness only knows what?
Well, my fellow guest was talking about missiles going off course and various things, and the leadership of the American army telling Nancy Pelosi it was the wrong thing to do, but they've already created, leadership of the American army have already created possibly the biggest catastrophe that has ever taken place in American military history, which is the catastrophic withdrawal from Afghanistan, and then the murder of an entire family while claiming it was a legitimate target. So, and whilst also going on about white rage and all of this stuff from General Milley. So I don't really trust the head of the American army about anything.
Interestingly, I actually agree with you. I think America's withdrawal...
Wowzers. I didn't expect to say that sentence today for mine,
but I think the American withdrawal from Afghanistan actually allowed Russia to invade Ukraine and made Russia think, well, actually, the Americans got defeated in Afghanistan. They surrendered, walked away. This is our moment to show our strength, and they're not going to do anything about it. And I think that's why. But this is what I fear with China and Taiwan. If you know, America's done this. If they really wanted to support democracy, they would have supported it in Afghanistan and actually helped the Afghan army fight against the Taliban and not withdrawn the way that they did. But they haven't done that. So this talk of we're promoting democracy, we're supporting democracy, I think it falls on deaf ears for a lot of people. And even, you know, President Zelensky, right at the start, wasn't sure if America was going to come through for them and open diplomatic conversations with the Russians in that conflict.
They did try and install a democratic government in Afghanistan over a period of, you know, decades, and it didn't work because that was not how the way Afghan culture worked or the geography worked.
I disagree. I'm Afghan, and
no, but I mean that's what they tried to do, and all I'm talking about is what's happened.
But I disagree. This idea that Afghans don't want democracy, or this, you know, people lost their fingers voting over the last 20 years. You know, people lost their lives defending democracy in Afghanistan. These ideals were there from before the 1960s.
So are you condemning America then?
No, what I'm saying is that the withdrawal, you know, if people were for withdrawal, fine. You know, America couldn't stay there forever, but it didn't have to do it the way that it did.
It was a publicity stunt. They wanted to get out within the 20-year anniversary.
And they said, they actually made a statement and said, we want to focus on other areas. We want to focus on our competition with China. And now what we see is Nancy Pelosi in Taiwan.
Elise, I think that's how you say your name. Elise says, normally I am fully aligned with Lawrence Fox, but on this occasion, I totally disagree with him. She's saying that Nancy Pelosi should not have visited Taiwan and that it's putting oil on the fire. Tom is another person that has that view as well, saying that ultimately it's wrong. You're provoking, she's provoking China for no good reason. And I have to say, I agree with Tom. And at least I do. I disagree with you.
That's fine. I like that.
And one of the reasons, because when I was contemplating talking about this today, and I was thinking, well, look, we've got a lot of problems going on in this country, let's face it. Of course, we've just seen interest rates go up again today. We knew that was going to happen, didn't we? We're seeing talk here of a recession today. Again, not great, but we knew that that was something that's going to happen. So the reason that I chose to talk about this, instead of going around the same circles when it comes to interest rates and recession projections, etc., is because the impact, if this is to escalate, so say, for example, if China do decide to exert force or whatever on Taiwan.
When they decide.
Yeah, well, they say by 2050 they're going to basically reunify it all. We will be in a situation, when I say we, I mean the West, because we've sanctioned Putin for his actions in Ukraine, we will be in a similar situation where we'll be pressured to act against China. Now, the reason this affects your average Joe on the street here is because if we start sanctioning China, etc., we will see huge economic ramifications, because if you think about us here, I mean, I don't know what you're all wearing, but if I was to look at the labels on some of my stuff, guarantee whether it's the devices or whatever, made in China will feature there. Some of these electronics, if not all of these electronics, will have semiconductors in them that have come from Taiwan. So the impact, the kind of influence and the spread, if you like, of Chinese products, Taiwan products here is absolutely immense. So the sanctions, the disruption, etc., would really hit us all. You're shaking your head. Why, Lawrence?
Well, but because the sanctions with Russia didn't work, because they didn't include fuel, did they? So it's the same with China. When we imposed sanction on China, it'll be like, you're going to have really bad sanctions except for iPhones and TVs and all the stuff that we want for free in the West. None of the sanctions on Russia worked. They won't work with China. China's going to invade Taiwan. It will take it back. There's nothing we can do about it. The best thing the West can do is stand up and go, we are a deterrent force for liberty, freedom of speech, all of the things that America stands behind. China couldn't have done more damage to the world than it has done in the last 2 years with its leaked bioweapon. So
yeah, but I mean, you say that it didn't, the sanctions, etc., hasn't
murdered
really
100 million Americans, 10 million Americans.
But look at, I mean, all of us now, our energy bills are going up. And actually, this situation is going to get a lot worse, because whilst we're not dependent on Russian energy, lots of our European cousins, I was going to call them cousins, but you know what I mean, lots of our European counterparts, they are. So what will happen is actually any squeezes that get put onto their side of things will absolutely hit ours, because it's basic supply and demand economics.
So get out a shovel, dig down into the ground, frack the hell out of the ground until we've got our own self-sufficiency.
Yeah, but you see, people keep saying about fracking as being the answer to our energy situation. And yes, in the medium term, fracking might be an answer, but you can get your shovel all you like. You can get a whole, B&Q's worth of shovels. That's not going to give you gas for this winter. It's a long way off. It's going to take years. Even if I gave you a shovel right now and bust you over to a fracking site, you're not going to give me any gas for quite a period of time.
Well, I know, and that's 10 years of Conservative government for you.
I think you're right, very, very right, Michelle, in terms of the power that China has on trade, especially with places like the UK and Europe, especially when it comes to gas and oil. With Russia's gas and oil issue, with China's trade issue. I think what we need to realise is global issues do have local impacts in the UK, and that's why these issues are really important. I don't think this was the right time for Nancy Pelosi to visit Taiwan, but I also don't think that China can dictate to the West where they should and shouldn't go.
Yeah, and by the way, you will find yourself not just in agreement with Lawrence Fox, Pimana, but you'll probably be disturbed to know that you found yourself in agreement with Donald Trump.
Oh,
because
God.
He shared that attitude, because I remember him having a call with one of the Taiwan leaders, and Taiwan was making threats to him, and he was saying, I will not be dictated to by China as to who I do and don't speak to. So, Pimana, you never thought you would have heard me say this, but tonight you are on a par with Lawrence Fox, and
that's not going to help my reputation on the streets, is it?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, your credibility among your peers is going to be shot. What can I say? Amber has just emailed in saying we absolutely must stand up to China. The best way to do that is to recognise Taiwan as a sovereign country. By the way, when it comes to that, there's only about, I think it's 13 or 15 places that do recognise Taiwan as a sovereign country. It's not many countries of note that you will have heard of. It's certainly not the UK, and it's certainly not the US. Do you agree with Amber, though? Is that the solution? And how bothered about this story are you in the UK? Do you sit there and think it has the potential to impact you? Or do you not care? You tell me. gbviews@gbnews.uk is the email address you can reach me on. Coming up a bit later on in the programme, I want to talk to you about diversity training. You know, the whole inclusion, diversity, we all know about it by now. Should workplaces be able to essentially force you onto mandatory training courses like this? Yes or no? You tell me, and I'll see you in a couple of minutes.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
As the race for number 10 intensifies, we are giving you the chance to get to know our next Prime Minister. We've invited the two candidates to meet you, the GB News viewers, and let you put your questions to them. Head directly to gbnews.uk or send me your questions to questions@gbnews.uk.
Join Alistair Stewart for the People's Forum with Liz Truss. Wednesday at 5, only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry, keeping me company until 7 o'clock tonight. My panel, Lawrence Fox, who's the leader of the Reclaim Party and the co-founder of the Bad Law Project, and the Labour Party, Councillor Pamana Assad. What's the Bad Law Project?
Bad Law Project is to find where good law has gone bad, as we saw in our massively viral clip of the police intimidating, bullying a perfectly innocent man on the weekend. So, yeah, we're after the foundational institutions and to get the nasty little woke diversity, equity and inclusion officers out of them.
We'll be coming on to that conversation as well about diversity and inclusion. Where do you stand on the whole situation about if you go to work as an employee, your employer could insist that you have to go on diversity and inclusion courses, many of which, by the way, will tell you if you're white that you're basically an awful person who needs to get on your knees and apologise for pretty much everything. Pamana's saying it's not true, but hold on, because we're not doing this topic yet, young lady. We're coming to that after the next break, because now I want to talk to you. Pamana's not having any of me, and I don't think she'll be having any of you, Lawrence, when it comes to our views on this training, so I look forward to that one. But for now, let me ask you this. Would you grass on your neighbours? If not, or if so, are there any limits? So would you sit there and say, well, I'll grass on them if they do this, but not if they do that? Or are you someone that's right up there, twitching your curtains, you got your clipboard out, you're monitoring all the goings on in your close, and you'd be straight on to the phone, to the police or whoever, if they were doing anything wrong? Because I've got to be honest, do you remember back in the pandemic, we were all encouraged, wasn't we, to basically grass on our neighbours for doing, I was just about to say doing things wrong, but quite frankly, it was doing things that were not wrong in my mind at all. But I digress. That's me going into my little mini rant about lockdowns. Let's park that for a second, though, because now we've got to talk about more hosepipe bans. We've got some, potentially even going to have some more. It's been suggested now that you're going to grass on your neighbours if they're out there using the hosepipe. It makes me laugh just because I do think it's a bit bit ludicrous. Over in Barnsley, for example, we've got a situation where disposable barbecues could be banned because they were the cause of a few of the fires that we've seen. Where do you stand on this? Do you think governments, councils, I'm looking at Pimana, should just back off and leave us to get on with our own lives? Are we in a nanny state, Pimana Assad?
No, because I think the job of government is to try and help fix problems that are huge and are impacting people's lives. And through this drought that we're seeing across the UK, extreme levels of heat, climate change is real as much as people might like to deny it. It's a scientific fact. And it is impacting us here in the UK. And so this hosepipe ban is because it's impacting farming, it's impacting water levels, and we need to be able to help the environment. But this whole snitching on your neighbour if they use the hosepipe, I think that is a bit extreme because, this sounds like very much Priti Patel. I mean, Priti Patel was the one who was saying, snitch on your neighbours if they're breaking COVID rules. And we did. We were one of the nation with the most snitches, I believe, people calling up the police and saying my neighbour's breaking the rules, and people were getting fines left, right and centre. I don't think that is right and that is correct, but I think that people should be educated on why there is a need to have a hosepipe ban so that we can help the environment.
Well, I would say that one of the reasons there's a need to have a hosepipe ban, for example, is that every single day 2.4 billion litres of water are lost in leaks just in England alone. So actually, before you start going round to Bob at number 4 because he's watering his daffodils, I'd be having a look at your own house inward and looking at why you're wasting billions and billions of litres of water a day in leaks. That's where I'd be focusing my attention. But where do you stand on it all, Lawrence?
I think it's sort of quite odd that in a country that rains solidly for most of the year that we run out of water, and as you say, however many billion litres of water
2.4
are getting leaked. And this whole sort of describing everything's like record heat wave, it should be described scientifically correctly as summer, as weather.
So you don't believe in climate change?
No, I do believe in climate change, but I don't think we're all going to roast in hell in the next 9 years like Alessandro Ocasio-Cortez does. I think that we need to stop the snitch culture. You did a little segue into lockdown. I was very honest and open about ignoring completely the science over lockdown and had loads and loads of parties and enjoyed it. And the person who reported and snitched on me would have been better off and probably made a few more quid if they'd just been leaning over Downing Street.
Did you get fixed penalty notice or anything like that?
No, I told them where to go when the police came round. I said, shove off, it's not your job, get out of my house.
So they did come to you?
Relentlessly.
Did they?
But you didn't get fined?
No, and I wouldn't have paid the fine if I did, and anyone who has been fined shouldn't pay it either.
At what stage of lockdown was this, though?
I made an absolute mission to make sure that every single weekend during the lockdown, I had as many people around my house as possible.
I think that's irresponsible because...
You're allowed to.
Yeah, I think that's irresponsible because there was a rule set and people were told not to have parties, people were told not to mingle like that because of spreading of the virus, and people did die
from having it.
But people did die from having it, and people wanted to protect their loved ones.
Didn't work, it's proven.
But here's the thing, though. It gave us time to be able to get the vaccine and to protect people.
Which also doesn't work. Did your mum ever tell you, if he told you to jump off the cliff, would you? That's what I was raised on, that philosophy. And
yes,
it was like,
but we follow the science here.
But the science was wrong. Vaccine doesn't work. And lockdowns didn't work either.
It wasn't supposed to fully protect you from never catching COVID.
That's what a vaccine is called, a sterilising vaccine.
It was to stop you from dying, though.
That's not how it was
I think
sold.
that's irresponsible. I think that you don't understand, clearly, collective responsibility. We live in a society. We're supposed to play our role in it and to protect each other. And you didn't do that then.
Would you lock down again now?
No, I wouldn't lock down right now. No.
Would you have locked down before, with the cases on the down now?
No, I think right at the start it was the right thing to do, right at the start, because we didn't know what was going on.
If there was a spike?
What would I lock down in winter? Well, I'd have to look at what was going on.
If you were told
I think most people have had COVID, though. Here's the thing, Michelle.
If you were told to
most people have had COVID by this point. And most people have had the vaccine. I don't wear a mask anymore.
Oh,
you
risk taker, you.
I know, right?
This is good.
I don't wear a mask anymore because...
When did you stop wearing a mask?
I don't know. It was this moment on the train where I was the only one wearing it and nobody else was wearing it. And I was thinking, I'm feeling suffocated. It's been 3 years now. I've had the booster as well because I'm asthmatic. And, I just couldn't.
I've had none of that stuff, and I'm
I
fine.
know that sometimes I feel guilty for not wearing it, but...
You feel guilty?
Yeah, I do. Yeah,
Why?
sometimes. Because I feel like if I was to bring COVID home and to infect one of my vulnerable, family members, then that would be my fault.
Well, you've always got monkeypox to look forward to,
Well, apparently that is also contagious.
COVID.
And I don't know how you...
What are you saying about monkeypox, Mana?
I was just saying, apparently it is also contagious in that way. Like
it's not in that way, it isn't.
No, in
That's
the other
why
way.
they call it long COVID.
Goodness gracious me! The monkey.
We segued from.
Yeah, we have segued, and I'll spare you all my thoughts on the whole monkeypox thing. But let me ask you about Pamana, the conversations around banning, for example, disposable barbecues. I think it's in Barnsley. Barnsley Council are touting that idea. Do you think that's really the level, look, we need to be at?
I think it's really annoying when you go to a park and you want to have a barbecue with your family and you don't have a garden or something and you're not allowed to have a barbecue in a park. I think that's really annoying for a lot of people. There are places across London, specifically, and maybe across the country, where there are parks you can have and safely have disposable barbecues. But it's right that there's a ban in certain areas because of the risk to setting alight, trees and wildlife, trees and nature reserves and actually causing damage to wildlife. There's a nature reserve behind my house and there aren't barbecues allowed there, and I think that that's right because of the danger to the environment. And the drought that we're in is really, really dry. We haven't had rain. You were saying no, but Lawrence, you were saying that it rains all the time, but it hasn't rained in quite a while, has it?
No, because it's called summer.
No, but it's not called summer. It's called climate change.
Well, I happen to have in my hand, ladies and gentlemen, some rainfall statistics. So I can tell you if you want. In July, England had 35% of what would have been expected of its rainfall, at 23 millimetres, if you're interested in this kind of thing. Wales had 53% of what was expected. Scotland had 81% of what was expected. And Northern Ireland had 51% of what was expected. So there you go. So in terms of expected rainfall, we didn't really have what we would have imagined that we would have. In terms of the hosepipe ban, am I right in thinking that Labour, as a party generally, you're backing the whole hosepipe ban thing?
I haven't seen any official lines on it yet, so I don't want to say something that's against party policy. But I think
just go with it. Just do was it Sam Tarry? Is that it? Just do your own.
No, because I don't want to get fined.
You don't want to?
I'm joking. I wouldn't get fined. But I think that it's sensible where there is a hosepipe ban because of the drought and the difficulties with water. But I think you're also right that people should look internally within their homes. If there are leaking pipes, they should get those fixed.
It's not internally. I'm on about the water companies. I'm on about the water industries.
I've got a plan.
What is it?
Why don't we retrain all of the diversity, equity and inclusion officers into being plumbers?
Yeah, leak checkers.
And then leak checkers.
Yes.
And the 75 grand a year, we'll get all of those out the institutions and they can
How
do some digging
about
up
water
and mending.
companies actually put the profits that they get back into the industry and fix the leaks?
Do you support nationalisation of water companies?
Do I support nationalisation of water companies? I don't know.
Because a lot of people...
Do you support nationalisation of anything?
The railways, yeah.
Yeah.
Why the railways?
Because I think that it needs investment and we just need to better the infrastructure.
But I thought, Pamana Assad, that the Labour policy was no longer nationalisation. I thought that very
It isn't, it's true. We've gone back.
Are you going off policy?
No, I'm not.
Keir Starmer, are you listening, Keir Starmer?
No, but here's the thing. I think that we should look at these cases individually. We can't just say, oh, we should nationalise everything. We should actually look at the industry, see whether that is the right decision for that industry.
You are a sensible Labour person.
Yes, I am.
This is amazing.
Are you shocked that such a thing exists?
I know. Well, it's often, you only sort of see Labour people on TV and they talk utter rubbish. But
wow, well, you should see my Twitter DMs and mentions.
But you're talking some common sense. I like it.
Well, there you go. Nationalisation, by the way, a lot of people, I do know, are in favour of nationalising things like water companies. And if you are one of them, let me ask you this. Do you have a pension? And if you do, there was a study done in 2019, I think it was. 67 UK pension funds are invested in the English water industry. That is 6 million of you have your pensions tied up in the English water industry. And it was acknowledged that if indeed the 2019 plans of nationalisation of the water industry has had occurred, those pension funds would have been hit. So it's all well and good saying that we support the policy of nationalisation, but when you realise it might hit you in your own back pocket, do you still support policies such as that?
That's why I think it's important to look at individual cases.
Well done, there
I
you
thought you
go.
were talking about the collective earlier.
Yes,
You've got to decide.
No.
This is the problem with you lefties.
What do you mean?
What
Collective
is it the sovereignty of the individual or is it the collective?
I think that's completely different. Come on, in nationalising an entire industry versus not holding a house party during a national pandemic. They're not the same thing.
Jim's been in touch saying disposable barbecues are just stupid. They cause destruction of wildlife habitats through idiots not caring how they use them. Yes, and you also go on though, Jim, and say that you think fireworks, for example, outside of November the 5th should be banned as well. But then you're banning the actual tool and not the idiot, to quote your term. Why should things like disposable barbecues be banned just because some people use them irresponsibly? Diane says, hosepipe bans were a feature of my youth. I'm in my 50s now, and there's nothing new in them. Did you follow them, Diane? Did you religiously follow the hosepipe ban? Or were you out there in the dead of night, in the darkness, just cheekily watering away? Let me know. Jim says, I absolutely would report my neighbours for using a hosepipe. And Stu said, of course I would. I'd snitch on them without a second's thought. Do I take it as you don't like your neighbours very much? Because if that's the case, and that changes the game, I will admit, if you've got neighbours that you don't get on with, that does change things, doesn't it? Right, it's going to take a break. When we come back, I want to talk to you about the comments from the Attorney General, Suella Braverman, who says that diversity training is riddled with left-wing views. Don't go away. I'll see you in a couple of minutes.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know. The latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Coming up on The Mark Steyn Show, Conservative woman Laura Perrins will be asking why no serious questions are being asked of the leadership candidates and why she believes the race for number 10 is full of sound and fury rather than solutions. Writer and broadcaster Sue Cook wants to know why so many children who are experiencing problems since COVID are still being ignored. Plus, Elton John's songwriter Gary Osborne will be adding some tone and tempo as we wind things down for the week. All of that and more on The Mark Steyn Show, tonight from 8 o'clock.
Tomorrow on Dewbs and Co, are you somebody that's frustrated with the state of the housing situation in this country? Are you desperate to get onto the housing ladder and struggling? If so, tomorrow's show, Fixing the Nation, is for you. No, I'm not giving away a free house or anything like that, but we will be having an in-depth look and debate at what is going on in the UK when it comes to the housing crisis. How can you get your foot on the ladder? Is it a pipe dream for many? What are the answers to all of it? Join me and my panel of experts from 6 o'clock tomorrow night, right here on GB News. Well, we'll be here until 7 o'clock. We're not fixing housing. We're about to get stuck into an argument, I think, anyway, about diversity and wokeness training. Geordie on the Twitter says, I am loving the loving between Lawrence Fox and Pamana Assad on Michelle Dewbs. Michelle is basically going to be the gooseberry or the chaperone between these two. I've got to say, something tells me they might have a disagreement on the next topic. But coming up at 7 o'clock, we've got Nigel Farage. Nigel, good evening. What have you got for us? Oh, we're not. OK, crikey, Mikey. I got shouted at very loudly in my ear then. It was so loud, you probably all heard it at home. It made me jump out my skin. The essence of the yelling was that I'm not teasing to Nigel. I do apologise. I didn't read my instructions properly. Let's get straight into it, shall we? Diversity training. Where do you stand on it? It's a thing now, isn't it? It's more than a thing. I would say it's a multi-million-pound industry, probably. There's always someone, isn't there, wanting to divide us, tell us a problem here and a problem there. And guess what? They have a course to fix it. Of course they do. The Attorney General, Suella Braverman, says these kind of courses, though, can be divisive rather than inclusive. And she claims the training in government departments is riddled with left-wing views. Liz Truss says if she becomes Prime Minister, she'll scrap around 350 diversity and inclusion jobs. If yours is one of them, though, do not worry, because Lawrence has got a plan. You can retrain as a leak checker. There you go. At least you'll have a job. Pamana, diversity training, where are you on it?
So I think Suella Braverman doesn't understand the role of Attorney General. I don't think she should be involving herself in cases like this about diversity and inclusion. I think she should be focusing on the law, which clearly she's not. She wants to get involved in these culture wars and consider everything and anything in government or anybody working in government as a civil service left wing. And I think that diversity and inclusion training is really important because it helps people understand each other better. It helps people understand issues that they might not have come across previously. You might come from a household where you don't accept LGBTQI plus people, and you get some training and you learn that that is an okay thing to have in society, you know, or you might think that it's wrong that a black person is in a certain job, and you get that training and it tells you actually everyone's equal and it's okay.
Do you think that the training courses should be mandatory? Do you think that if you...
But they're not, though. I've never had a job where I've been forcefully...
We're bad law projects running a case at the moment where it's mandatory. The person that we're representing doesn't get to qualify unless she admits that she's got white...
What kind of job is it, though?
Well, I can't go into it because it's a very private thing at the moment, but don't worry, it'll be announced soon.
OK.
That sounds a secret. We're looking forward to that.
Well, I think that there's certain jobs where you need to be aware of all the biases that are there in society. Unconscious bias.
I don't care what
unconscious bias.
You are.
But here's the thing, though. It's not just about race, though. It's about accent. It's about education. There are white working class people who are discriminated against in jobs, for example.
Mainly.
Because of their accent, because of their background, because of their class.
Because it's like, I'm not coming on here banging the drum for white people. I don't care. It's like we're all made equal before the eyes of God. We're all the same.
Yeah.
You can't get equality of result, of outcome. You cannot do it. That's what communism is. It is completely impossible, the level of bureaucracy you've got to do. You've got to live in a meritocratic world. You are better at something than I am. I am better at something than you are. That's just the way it is. And these diversity, equity and inclusion officers are pointless wastes of time because actually in an economy which it needs to recover, you want productive people that are productive. So best case scenario, these people are just impairing productivity by walking around going, how do we divide people? Worst case scenario, they're instilling woke, really hard leftist, anti-British values in.
Anti-British values? I mean, come on.
Judge someone on the colour of their skin.
Are you really? What is British values? Can you outline what British values are? And also, can you define what woke is?
Under the law.
OK.
Yeah, free speech.
Yeah.
I'd say that.
And why would they be teaching against that in diversity and inclusion? training?
Because it's not teaching, it's indoctrination.
It's not indoctrination.
I don't look at
you could go to a diversity and inclusion training.
You just told me you're from Afghanistan originally, right? I didn't even cross my mind what I was thinking of.
But you probably did look online.
If we want a diversity officer of any kind at all, you want someone who sits there and goes, we want diversity of opinions. We will impose, we will go, there is a safe space for everyone to have an opinion. That's what I would like to say.
But the diversity people do make me laugh, Pimana, because when they say let's do all this diversity and inclusion training, what they really mean is sit in this classroom and be told to think like me. And what they don't want, yes, they do, Pimana, what they don't want is diversity of thought. So when all these people say we want diversity and inclusion, I always think to myself, but you don't really, because you don't want diversity of thought, which is, to me, one of the most key aspects of diversity that there is.
I'm against cancel culture, and I think that people shouldn't be cancelled just because they hold an opinion. Where I think that this becomes really dangerous is where you have people in positions of power in big, powerful industries where they enact on their bias and they harm people's livelihoods,
like Priti Patel and
certain people. No, that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is in the workplace where people feel they're discriminated against because of their background, because of their class, because of their race. So, but feelings don't take into account. No, but it is about everything's about feelings and emotions. So you feel like you're discriminated against, or that you're being attacked because some people do because they feel like, oh, white people are under attack. They're not. That's not the case. Diversity and inclusion training is there to help us understand each other's issues. And I have never come across but here's the thing, I've never come across. Some people can't do it like that though, Lawrence. It can't just be me and you sitting in the pub and having a conversation about certain issues. People don't feel comfortable. And they need to be able to have that discussion in a more, with professionals who understand and have literally understood these issues way more than...
by who?
They're academics. They've gone through loads of training, qualifications to actually do some of this stuff.
It's division, inequity and exclusion.
I've never been in a workplace where it's been mandatory, and if there is mandatory, it's interesting because I would want to understand what exactly is mandatory.
Oh, don't worry, we'll be finding out.
Here we go. Maurice says, working in the NHS, diversity training is mandatory. If you are not up to date with those modules, they could stop you working. Tommy says, I've just been directed to attend trans awareness at my workplace. It's not an optional thing, it's a mandatory thing.
But what's wrong with going and understanding an issue? That's my question. What's wrong with going to...
I don't want to be educated by somebody else. I want to have a conversation with somebody else. I don't want someone to sit there and tell me what I do or don't understand, or I don't feel confident or safe enough to tell you. If you don't have the moral fortitude to have a conversation with someone, then you're not able to be part of the conversation.
My question is, how are you going to stop someone from enacting on bias?
What bias?
Bias that might be there.
What does that mean?
But you don't agree there is bias. I think there is bias.
Everyone's got bias. We're all biased.
Especially for something like the NHS, for example. If you have someone who's discriminating against one patient versus another patient based on just how they look, for example, or based on what clothes they're wearing or what kind of accent they have, do you think that's right or wrong?
There's ghost hunting. You're ghost hunting. How you don't know the inside of someone else's mind.
No, that's true, we don't, but that's why the training's important.
Retrain these people as plumbers, give them a spanner, get them to mend the leaky pipes, and Britain will be a better country.
Diversity and inclusion training is really important, but I actually don't think it's working, though. I don't actually think it's working.
It's divided the country.
No, it's not about division. I just don't think it's working because I think no matter how much training you put people in, some people will walk out that and think that was BS and walk away and not listen to any of it. What I do think we need to have is more inclusive workplaces where people are able, not hierarchy and pitting people against one another, and actually allowing people to be creative in whatever profession that they work in.
I agree with you. You don't need a diversity and inclusion officer for that.
But I do think it's important to have it. But there's not those inclusive work environments. That's why there is diversity.
Where I work.
When you say inclusive work environments, see, this is one of the problems that I've got because they're not inclusive. What they mean is, I'm going to train you to all think the way that I'm going to tell you to think. So, for example,
that's called indoctrination. That's called like a concentration camp. You think that is like that?
Yes, I think that some of these...
How do the Uyghurs feel in China then? They're in actual concentration camps, being indoctrinated with actual propaganda. This is not propaganda.
Tommy, who has just messaged me and told me that he's been directed to attend a trans awareness course at the workplace. Now, I don't know your views, Tommy, and I'm not here to judge your views either, but let's just assume, in my hypothetical example, Tommy goes to this course and decides he doesn't agree that someone can change biological sex. Do you think that he'd be included in his workplace?
He should be included in his workplace.
Do you think he would be?
But how would anybody know that unless he openly makes it an issue?
So if he went to the training and Tommy said, the teacher's sitting there and the teacher's going, right, Tommy, you can decide today that you are Tommy. Tomorrow, Tommy, you can decide that you're Tom Wetter and you can be a girl. And if Tommy says to the teacher, I don't believe that actually you can change your biological sex, I believe that he would be...
discriminating.
Yeah, but he shouldn't, but that is wrong. But that is wrong, though.
Can I just say one thing?
But to be discriminated against like that.
It's much more sinister than that, because diversity, equity and inclusion is taking place in the form of PSHE in schools where they're teaching gender ideology. So it's all very well for an adult, and I think you'd find that most moderate adults would fully support trans people, gay people, lesbian, bisexual, all of the alphabets people. They'd fully support it as adults. But when you're getting this stuff in schools and you've got little 10-year-old boys wearing dresses who've got no option but to carry on down the path to transition, then your average Joe is going to find a problem with that.
But who said that they're being forced to?
I've given you examples.
That's in the workplace, but no, but that's...
Right, guys, I've just realised it's the time. I've done all that debate, and the end of it is Permana doesn't even still believe that people are being told to go on these courses. Ladies and gentlemen, I give up. Margaret says these courses should all be scrapped. In her view, they should never have even started. She says they're useless because if you're a racist, I doubt a course would change you. In fact, it would be quite the opposite. Anyway, you tell me, where do you stand on it all? Get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.uk is the email address. But for now, that's all I've got time for. Pimana, Lawrence, you going for a drink now together?
I'm up for a pint.
Oh, hey, I'm going as well. Right, I'll see you all. Have a nice night. We're off to the pub.
Hello, I'm Alex Deacon with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Sunny spells for most tomorrow. Showers across the north, whereas the south will stay dry. That's the forecast for a number of days ahead, thanks to high pressure slowly but surely moving in. Low pressure is close to northern Scotland, and that will throw some showers in here overnight. We've got some around at the moment. And I think as we go through the evening, we'll see a few more showers coming into the north of Northern Ireland and the west coast of Scotland. Later in the night, maybe one or two coming into northwest England and North Wales. Bit of cloud at times across East Anglia in the south east. Small chance of a shower here, but really not much in the way of rainfall at all. And a cool night, certainly compared to earlier in the week. Much fresher, much less humid. Some places starting off in single figures on Friday. We'll start off with quite a bit of sunshine over Wales, the Midlands, southern England and eastern England, eastern Scotland too. Further west, there will be some scattered showers, and we'll see those showers developing more widely over northern England and central and eastern Scotland come the afternoon. But easing in western Scotland, the south stays dry, quite warm here, but as I said, it won't be as humid. On the cool side further north, we might get up to 20 Celsius, but generally mid to high teens. Still a few showers in the east during tomorrow evening, but they'll fade pretty quickly. So for most, it's going to be a fine Friday evening. Quite cool, though. Temperature will drop off fairly sharply, and it will be a bit chilly first thing on Saturday morning. But again, it's blue skies, certainly for the majority across England and Wales. Northern England will cloud over. A fair bit of cloud at times for Northern Ireland. Certainly a grey start to the weekend in Scotland. But even here, generally turning brighter through the day. We'll always keep some outbreaks of rain going across the far north, where it will again be cool, but elsewhere signs of temperatures on the rise once more. Similar conditions on Sunday with some patchy rain across the far north and northwest, but for most it's dry with sunny spells. I say signs of things warming up into next week. We are GB News.
We're